Now let's have a discussion on different types of mobile networks. Now we are not going to go into the details of how a mobile phone works and what is the entire procedure behind the working of mobile phones. That's not required for your exam. But what we are going to have a discussion on mainly is the evolution of mobile phones that we have seen. The evolution of mobile networks over a period of time. So today we know that we are entering an era where we say that now we are in the fifth generation. Although most of the places still we are using fourth generation, but fifth generation has started to come. So we need to understand what is the meaning of fourth generation, fifth generation, how has the evolution happened over a period of time. So let's start. The first thing is the first generation or 1G. So 1G was the first generation of mobile networks. Now this is where mobile phones were what mobile phones were supposed to be. That you have a device in your hand, and this device is being used for talking without the use of any wires, without having to sit at one place and talk, because your entire telephone is connected to wires. So you have a kind of a wireless phone with you, a mobile phone so to say, which you can carry in your pockets and take it around and still be able to talk to people over this network. So this was the first generation. No internet, nothing, only you will be able to talk over this mobile phone. So introduced in the 1980s, the speed between 2.4 to 14.4 kbps and supported only voice. Then after that comes the second generation. And second generation is where for the first time now you can also use internet on your mobile phone. Although this internet is much slower as compared to what you see today. The kinds of pages that we are able to access on our mobile phones today, those kind of pages would have perhaps taken hours to load, or rather may not have loaded at all. So although internet was introduced now on the mobile phone, but the use of internet could have been very limited. The way in which internet would have been used was very different and could only support a very small amount of data. So introduced in the 1990s, speed between 14.4 to up to 50 kbps and supports voice and data. So that's why up to 50 kbps means that you cannot even think of buffering the kinds of videos that you buffer today. You won't be able to watch very high bandwidth videos, very high quality videos. Only a very low quality video perhaps could be watched, that too after waiting for maybe 10 minutes to just let the video load. Only after that you could have used it. So supports voice and data. So for the first time now you have internet also. Then you come to the third generation mobile network. Now in the third generation the speeds were improved significantly. Now the kind of internet usage that you have was much better, much faster as compared to what we saw with 2G. So again supports voice, supports data, just that at a much better pace as compared to second generation. So introduced in 2001, speed 3.1 Mbps, supports voice and data both. Then after that comes the fourth generation mobile network. Now in fourth generation mobile network, what we now see is that speeds improve even further. As compared to what we see in 3G, 4G has much better speeds. So speed goes up to 100 Mbps, again supports voice and data both. Now when it comes to 4G, there are two types of networks or two types of technologies over which 4G has been built. One which is called as LTE and the second one which is called as Volte. So LTE basically stands for long term evolution. Long term evolution. And this is one key technology on which 4G is based, because this also uses a combination of what we already had discussed about OFDMA and MIMU. Both these technologies were in use in LTE also. So LTE initially was not really 4G. It was introduced as a different technology, but it became the backbone of 4G technology. It was not used along with 2G or 3G technologies. It was used only along with 4G technologies for the first time. It is something that was introduced by a company called as NTT Docomo. If you remember Tata Docomo networks that once in India also we used to have, the same Docomo in Japan for the first time had introduced LTE. And this LTE became the backbone of 4G technology. It started to improve the network speeds. speed both in terms of your calling and also in terms of data transmission. So that's why even the internet would be used at a much better pace as compared to 3G or 2G or the preceding network systems. So this is what we saw with LTE. Now, as an upgrade on LTE, we saw Volte. And in this Volte, VO stands for voice over. VO stands for voice over LTE. So now here what happens is, if you have been using, let's say, mobile phone for a very long time, earlier you might have seen that if you are talking on the phone, you would not be able to use your internet network. You would not be able to use your 4G internet network, or rather 3G or 2G internet network. Right? Either use the internet or talk on the phone. While you are talking on the phone, you will only be able to talk and not use the internet. As soon as you disconnect your voice call, only after that you can use the internet. But with Volte or voice over LTE, now you had a new way where you could talk on the phone and also use or browse the internet at the same time. So this was a significant improvement, that now the LTE networks are being used for data and then the voice basically is being used separately. So that's why both could be used simultaneously as well. So that was the basic upgradation that Volte had over LTE. So this both came in 4G. First 4G came with LTE and then 4G also was introduced with Volte. Then finally comes 5G or fifth generation mobile, which was introduced in 2019. Speed now goes up to 10 Gbps and supports both voice and data. So now 5G basically is the new generation of mobile network, a much faster generation of mobile network. At the same time could be used in many places. For example, there is something which is called as Internet of Things. I will have a discussion on what Internet of Things means. But for Internet of Things, two very important technologies that will help support Internet of Things is Wi-Fi 6 and fifth generation mobile phone or fifth generation network. These two things together will make sure that Internet of Things can work. What is Internet of Things? We'll just have a discussion on that separately in the same chapter itself. But for now, just hold on to this. So now fifth generation is the new generation of mobile phones that we are looking at. And fifth generation comes with a lot of advantages today. So advantages, if we look at, first, faster data speed, easily up to 10 Gbps. The second point is ultra low latency. What is the meaning of latency? Latency is simple, that how much time does it take for data to go from one point in a network to another. Alright, so that is called as latency. The amount of time that you are taking or the data is taking to go from one point to another point. This will be called as latency. So now latency is a very important factor in a network. That latency would mean that there is a delay in the transmission of information. So we would want that the transmission of information happens as soon as possible, that there is no delay in the transmission. So for that, there is something which is also called as ping rate. You might have come across this term, ping rate, and especially, if you play games, you might have seen this. For example, PUBG used to have this ping rate thing, that if the ping rate is high, means that the latency is high, meaning that your game experience will not be very good because your network is not responding on time. So there is a lag in the network among different connected players. So other players are able to get all the information and are playing in real time, and your connection would perhaps be lagging by 1 second or two, which is more than enough for you to lose the game. So this is called as ping rate. So if ping rate is high, means that the latency is high, meaning that there is a delay in the transmission of data from one point in network to another. So here we are talking about ultra low latency. That latency in this network will be very low. There are various factors that can cause this latency. For example, the kind of connectivity that you have. Normally we see that if you have optical fiber cables, then the latency is very low. Compared to that, if you have copper cables, the latency is little higher. If you are connected through satellite networks, then latency is even higher. So it depends on what kind of connection you have. So that will also determine the latency. Apart from that, if there is a congestion in the network. So if there is a network congestion, that will also cause delay in the transmission of the network. That will also cause delay in the transmission of the information, and that also will cause latency. Then efficiency of the system also matters. If the efficiency is low, the latency can be very high. Then after that, the distance from the source of transmission. If the distance between the transmitter and the receiver is very large, then in that case also latency can increase. So these are some of the factors that will increase or decrease the latency in a given network. So in 5G, one of the most important factors or advantages is that it will have very low latency. All right. So that is there. Then after that, connectivity for Internet of Things, we discussed that, and we'll discuss this in detail again. Efficiency in tele-education, that is providing education through satellite networks. This is something that can be done. So efficiency in tele-education also will increase. Then in agriculture also we'll see better application of agriculture. That we'll see, for example, precision farming, smart irrigation techniques. We'll be able to analyze the data much quicker, and we'll be able to use this data to our advantage. Then in manufacturing sector also, in automation, it will help more. That's where we'll see that in a given network, the kind of communication that different parts of the network used to have, they will also increase now with 5G. Then efficient telemedicine facilities, same as teleeducation, here also this will happen. Smart cities and traffic management, and then increasing the GDP and digitization of economy. These two also are factors where 5G will be helpful to India. So there are many advantages that we are looking at, but at the same time, the implementation of 5G is not going to be that easy, because there are some disadvantages also. For example, very high investment is required. You need to set up a completely new infrastructure as compared to what we have now. So that's why that's going to be a big challenge, that the entire country needs to adopt a new infrastructure. That is going to take up a lot of cost as well. Then the spectrum is going to be much more expensive as compared to 4G. Allocation of spectrum and the use of spectrum will be much higher in cost. Then issue of compatibility of old devices. You'll see that many of the devices, or rather most of the devices that you have, if the device is older than 2019, if it is 2019 or before that, then in that case you would see that you will not be able to use those devices with 5G. So new devices that started to come since 2020 onwards, these are the devices that have a capacity to use 5G. Otherwise, all the older devices, they won't be able to use 5G. So that's another problem, that if you want to switch to 5G, you need a new device. So not everyone can afford a new device every now and then. So that's why that's another problem. Then security and privacy issues. We need to look into different areas of this 5G network, whether they are safe to use, whether there are security challenges, and how to overcome all these security challenges. Then lack of uniform regulatory policy. In various countries today, we see that 5G is coming at its own pace. For example, countries like USA and South Korea became the first countries to start adopting 5G technology. But apart from that, other countries have taken some time. So one by one, we are looking at different countries starting to adopt 5G technology. So that also becomes one of the hindrances. That regulatory policies also will also come one by one in different countries, and then perhaps that will also cause a big problem. Then high battery drain of equipments using 5G. 5G will be much more power intensive. So that's why you will need larger batteries, you will need more efficient batteries at least. Otherwise, the power consumption will start to rise, because power consumption of all these devices will be much higher as compared to what we have seen with 4G. And then lack of fiber optics connectivity, that is limited coverage. Now, even if you look at today, in today's scenario also in India, we do not have 4G connectivity all across the country. There are many parts in the country still which do not even have a mobile network. Forget about 4G mobile network. So in all these cases, what starts to happen is that initially we'll see that there will be very limited connectivity, that maybe only in the metros will start to see 5G network coming in, and then perhaps from there it will start to spread on. So it will take a lot of time, because even now we have not been able to supply mobile networks to entire country. So mobile network comes, 4G comes, then 5G networks will be laid on. So that's why it will take a lot of time for the 5G network to be established properly across the country. So that's why these are some of the challenges, shortcomings, or disadvantages that we have currently with 5G. Look at this question, which has come with regards to mobile networks. With reference to communication technologies, what is or are the difference or differences between LTE or long term evolution and Volte, that is voice over long term evolution? One, LTE is commonly marketed as 3G and Volte is commonly marketed as advanced 3G. This is completely false because we discussed that LTE and Volte both started to come with 4G. So that's why statement number one is completely wrong. LTE is data only and Volte is voice only. Now, Volte is not voice only, it is voice over. Correct? So, what is it allowing you to do? It is allowing you to use internet and mobile calling or voice calling at the same time. Correct? With LTE, we could only use voice or data at one time. Correct? So, that's why saying that Volte is voice only is wrong. So that's why both the statements that have been given here, both the statements are wrong. So correct answer here will be D. That is neither one nor